The house should not exist here. Elias stood at the small viewing port, the only window, and watched the tundra stretch white and featureless to the horizon. No trees, no hills, just snow and permafrost, and the curve of the earth. The thermometer outside read -58 degrees Celsius. Inside, the temperature held at precisely 21 degrees. 5 walls separated him from the cold. The outermost layer was reinforced concrete, 2 feet thick, designed to withstand Arctic winds that could strip flesh from bone. Beneath that, a foot of dense foam insulation. Then a layer of lead sheeting originally meant for radiation, now repurposed for sound dampening. Another foot of acoustic foam, the kind used in recording studios. Finally, the innermost wall of compressed wool and cork. 5 feet of barrier between Elias and the world. The construction had taken 3 years. The materials had cost everything he owned. Getting them here, to this coordinates, only location 400 kilometers from the nearest settlement, had required bribes and lies and the patience of someone with nothing left to lose. People thought he was hiding from the cold. Let them think that. Elias moved through the house, though calling it a house felt generous. It was more accurate to call it a bunker. A sensory deprivation chamber built at the edge of the world. 3 rooms, living space, supply storage. Bathroom with a chemical toilet. No plumbing, water would freeze in the pipes. No electricity from outside. A small generator in a separate outbuilding, heavily insulated. Barely audible even when running at full capacity. Every surface covered in acoustic paneling. Every corner filled with sound dampening material. The floor was triple-layered, concrete, rubber, cork. He had measured the ambient noise level when he first sealed the final wall. 12 decibels, quieter than a whisper, quieter than breathing. So quiet that most people would find it unbearable within minutes. The human ear, deprived of input, begins to generate its own sounds. Tinnitus, hallucination. The brain filling the void, but Elias knew the difference between internal noise and external threat. He had come to the tundra because it was the quietest place on Earth. No insects, no birds, no rustling leaves or running water. In winter, even the wind sometimes stopped, leaving a silence so complete it felt like death. And in that silence, you could hear it. The hum. Elias checked the decibel meters mounted on each wall. Digital readouts constantly monitoring. The readings were stable, 12 to 14 decibels, normal, safe. He exhaled slowly and felt his shoulders relax. The house had taken everything from him. His savings, his relationships, his reputation. Colleagues at the university had called him paranoid. His brother had stopped returning calls. The last woman he dated had left after he tried to explain about the frequency. "You need help," she said. "Professional help." But professionals did not believe in sounds only one person could hear. Elias had first noticed it 7 years ago. A low-frequency vibration, barely perceptible, like standing near a large machine. Feeling it in your chest more than hearing it with your ears. It came in the quiet moments, late at night in his apartment, early morning in his office. Anytime the ambient noise dropped below a certain threshold. At first, he thought it was tinnitus. Then he thought it was the building HVAC system. Then he thought he was losing his mind. But the frequency was real. He had measured it, recorded it, analyzed the waveform. 7 hertz, below the range of normal human hearing, but within the range of human perception. Infrasound, the frequency of dread. He had researched infrasound obsessively. Learned that it occurs naturally wind across desert dunes. Ocean waves, earthquakes, avalanches. Learned that it can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, even visual hallucinations. Learned that some researchers believe certain haunted locations were simply spaces where natural infrasound accumulated. But the sound Elias heard was not random. It had a rhythm, a pattern, like breathing, like a heartbeat, and it was getting louder. Year by year, the episodes became more frequent, the sound more distinct. He started wearing earplugs, noise-canceling headphones. He moved to quieter neighborhoods, then to the countryside, then to increasingly remote locations. But silence was the problem. The quieter his environment, the more clearly he could hear it. So he had come to the Arctic, to the deadest, most silent place he could find. And he had built walls. Elias prepared his evening meal, freeze-dried stew, reconstituted with melted snow. He ate slowly, mechanically. The only sounds were his chewing, his breathing. The slight scrape of spoon on bowl, 12 decibels. He checked the meters again, still stable. Outside, The sun, such as it was during the polar winter, had set hours ago. The darkness here was absolute. No light pollution, no moon tonight, just black pressing against the small window. Elias extinguished the lamp and sat in the darkness, listened, his heartbeat. 62 beats per minute, his breathing, 14 breaths per minute. Nothing else, nothing else. He allowed himself to believe for a moment that he had succeeded, that 5 feet of wall and 400 kilometers of tundra were enough, that he was finally safe. Then he heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable, the hum. 7 hertz, rising from somewhere beneath perception into the range where it became almost audible. Elias felt his chest tighten, his pulse quickened. He checked the meters. 14 decibels, unchanged, but he could feel it in his sternum, in his jaw, in the hollow spaces behind his eyes, the frequency. It had found him again. Elias did not sleep that night. He sat in the darkness with his hand pressed flat against the innermost wall, feeling for vibration, for transmission, for the point where the sound was entering. By dawn, a gray lightening of the eastern horizon that barely qualified as sunrise, he had narrowed it to the northwest corner of the living space. The decibel meters showed nothing. The frequency was below their range. But Elias could feel it. A rhythmic pulse, slow, deep thrum, pause, thrum, pause, like a heartbeat but slower. 58 beats per minute, 4 beats slower than his own. He pulled back the acoustic foam panels in the northwest corner, examined the lead sheeting beneath. No cracks, no gaps. The seams were sealed with acoustic caulk, thick and black. But sound was not water. It did not need a physical gap. It could travel through solid material, through concrete and lead and foam. Everything was permeable at the right frequency. Elias retrieved his equipment from storage: acoustic analyzer, contact microphones, seismograph sensors, the tools of his obsession. He attached a contact microphone to the wall and connected it to the analyzer. Put on headphones. Increase the gain. There, not loud, but present. A low-frequency oscillation, cycling between 6 and 8 hertz. The waveform on the analyzer screen looked almost biological, rhythmic, organic. Elias played with the filters, isolated the frequency, amplified it. The sound filled his headphones. Deep, resonant, not mechanical, not random. He tore off the headphones. His hands were shaking. The frequency was coming through the wall, through 5 feet of carefully engineered barrier, through lead and concrete and foam. It was not supposed to be possible. Elias spent the next 6 hours reinforcing the northwest corner. He added another layer of acoustic foam, sealed every microscopic gap with caulk, hung heavy wool blankets, created a dead space, an air gap between the new layer and the old. By the time he finished, his hands were raw and his back ached. He checked the decibel meters, 11 decibels, slightly lower than before. He sat on the floor in the center of the room, closed his eyes, listened. His heartbeat, now elevated, 74 beats per minute. His breathing, shallow, quick, and beneath it, barely perceptible, the thrum. 58 beats per minute, steady, patient. Waiting, Elias opened his eyes and stared at the northwest corner, at the layers of material he had just added, at the obsessive architecture of his fear. The house was supposed to be a solution, a refuge, the culmination of years of planning and sacrifice, but the frequency had followed him here, through 400 kilometers of frozen nothing, through 5 feet of wall. What if distance did not matter? What if thickness did not matter? What if the only variable that mattered was silence itself? The quieter the environment, the more clearly the frequency emerged, like turning down background noise until the one persistent sound became undeniable. Elias had built the quietest place on Earth, and in doing so, he had created the perfect listening chamber. He laughed. The sound was harsh and foreign in the muffled space. It died immediately, absorbed by foam and wool. The meters registered a brief spike, 18 decibels, then settled back to 11. Elias lay on the floor and pressed his ear against the cork. Listened to the structure, to the materials, to the silence between his heartbeats. The thrum was there, faint but constant, not coming through the wall, coming through the floor. The storm arrived on the 3rd day. Elias first noticed it as a change in air pressure. His ears popped. The small viewing port began to frost over from the outside, despite the insulation. Within an hour, the world beyond the window had disappeared, not into darkness, but but into white. Total whiteout, snow-driven horizontal by winds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. The house shuddered, groaned. The concrete shell absorbed the impact, but the sound traveled through the structure. A low moan, almost alive. Elias checked the meters. 16 decibels. The storm was louder than silence, but the walls dampened it. Inside felt like being underwater. Distant, muted. He had supplies for 6 months. Water, food, fuel for the generator. He was prepared for isolation, for winter, for the physical challenges of the Arctic. But he was not prepared for the weight of the silence. As the storm raged outside, the space inside seemed to compress. The air felt thicker, heavier. Each breath required more effort. Elias sat on his cot and focused on his breathing. 14 breaths, per minute, steady, controlled. But beneath his breathing, the thrum had grown stronger. 58 beats, per minute, unchanged, unaffected by the storm. He pressed his hand flat against the floor, felt the vibration transmitted through cork and rubber and concrete. The sound was not coming from outside. It was not coming through the walls. It was coming from below, from the permafrost, from the frozen earth beneath the foundation. Elias stood and began to pace. 3 steps to the wall. Turn. 3 steps back. The room was too small. The walls too close. He had built this place to escape the frequency, but he had built it directly on top of the source. The realization was so obvious it felt like a physical blow. The tundra, the permafrost, frozen ground extending down hundreds of meters, ice and soil and ancient compressed time. And beneath all of it, the breathing earth. The storm lasted 2 days. During that time, Elias did not sleep. He sat in the center of the room with his equipment surrounding him. Contact microphones pressed to the floor, seismograph recording constantly, headphones on. The frequency was clearest at night, between 0200 and 040 hours, when his own body was quietest, when the storm outside had momentarily lessened. Thrum, 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 58 beats, per minute. But there was something else, something he had not noticed before. The frequency was not constant. It varied, shifted, between 6 and 8 hertz, cycling in a pattern. 6 hertz for 3 beats, 7 hertz for 5 beats, 8 hertz for 2 beats. Then repeat, a pattern, a rhythm, a code, or not a code, something simpler. Breath, inhale, hold, exhale. The earth was breathing. Elias took off the headphones. His hands were numb. His eyes burned from staring at the waveform display. The storm outside had stopped. The wind had died. The world beyond the small window showed nothing but white and the faint gray light of polar dawn. He went to the viewing port and looked out. The snow had drifted against the house, against the walls, creating a new layer, a new barrier. But barriers did not matter when the threat was beneath you. Elias returned to the center of the room, Saturday on the floor, placed both palms flat against the cork. The frequency pulsed up through his hands, through his arms, into his chest. 58 beats, per minute. His own heart had slowed to match it. 60 beats, per minute now, synchronizing. He pulled his hands away, but the synchronization continued. He could feel it, his heartbeat adjusting, aligning, finding the rhythm of the earth beneath him. Elias stood and backed against the wall. His pulse was racing now, 90 beats per minute, trying to escape the pattern. But the thrum remained constant, patient, waiting for him to stop fighting, waiting for him to listen. Elias made the decision at dawn. He would go deeper. If the sound was coming from beneath the house, he needed to measure it at the source, needed to understand what he was hearing. The seismic microphone was designed for geological research, for measuring earthquakes and tectonic shifts, for listening to the planet. He had brought it to document the absence of sound, to prove that Tundra was the quietest place on Earth. Now he would use it to listen to what lived beneath the quiet. The permafrost extended down 300 meters at this latitude, frozen for thousands of years. In summer, the top meter might thaw, but beneath that was ice and soil compressed into something harder than concrete. Elias drilled a narrow hole through the floor, through cork and rubber and concrete, down into the permafrost itself. 1 meter deep, the drill bit screamed. The sound was violently loud in the muffled space. The decibel meters spiked to 95. Then he stopped and silence rushed back in. Elias fed the microphone cable down into the hole, secured it, connected it to the recorder and analyzer, put on the headphones, and listened to the earth. At first there was nothing, just the faint electronic hiss of the equipment, the ambient noise of the system itself. Then, slowly the frequency emerged. Not 7 hertz. Deeper, lower 4 hertz. At the very edge of human perception, but layered, complex, not a single tone but multiple frequencies harmonizing. 4 hertz, 7 hertz, 11 hertz, 18 hertz, a chord, an interval, a voice. Elias increased the gain. The sound filled his headphones, filled his head, resonated in his skull and sternum and spine. It was not mechanical, not geological, in the simple sense of grinding plates or shifting ice. It was organic, alive, ancient. The earth beneath the tundra was breathing, had been breathing for millennia. A slow respiration measured in minutes rather than seconds, in years rather than hours. Inhale, the permafrost contracting, compressing, hold, silence, stillness, exhale. The permafrost expanding, releasing, and the frequency was the sound of that breath. The vibration of ice and soil and ancient frozen time moving in response to pressure and temperature and the weight of the world above. Elias had come here to escape a sound. But the sound was not a threat. It was not intentional. It was simply the planet existing, being, breathing, and his house, his fortress of silence, was built directly on top of it. He took off the headphones. Saturday in silence. His own breathing had synchronized with the frequency. 4 breaths per minute, deep, slow, matching the rhythm of the earth. He could not stop it. The pattern had entered him, had become part of his own internal clock. The house was not a shield. It was a resonance chamber, an amplifier. The walls and floor and foundation transmitted the frequency upward, focused it, concentrated it into the small space where Elias lived. He had spent 3 years and everything he owned building the perfect prison, and he had locked himself inside. Elias stood, walked to the small viewing port, looked out at the tundra. The white expanse stretched forever, empty, silent, beautiful in its absolute sterility. He could leave, walk out into the cold, let the minus 60 degrees take him within hours, join the silence permanently, or he could stay, live with the frequency, let his heartbeat synchronize completely, become part of the breathing earth, or he could return, rejoin the noisy world, the chaos and clutter and constant sound that had driven him here in the first place. 3 choices, all of them surrenders. Elias spent his last night in the house listening, not to the frequency. He had heard that enough, had measured it, analyzed it, understood it as much as any human could understand the breathing of a planet. He listened to himself, to his heartbeat now permanently slowed to 58 beats per minute, to his breathing, deep and rhythmic, 4 breaths per minute, to the sound of his thoughts in the silence, the voice inside his head that had been his only companion for months. In the morning, he made his choice. He dismantled the acoustic foam in the northwest corner, removed the wool blankets, pulled back the layers he had so carefully installed. He opened the small viewing port as wide as it would go, 10 centimeters, letting in a thin stream of Arctic air. The temperature inside the house began to drop immediately, 21 degrees, 1915. The decibel meters registered the change, wind sound, 22 decibels. Then 28, then 35. Noise, beautiful, chaotic, random noise, and beneath it, still present but no longer dominant, the frequency. Thrum, 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 the earth breathing. Elias sat in the center of the room as the cold entered and the silence broke. His choice was not to leave or stay or die. His choice was to stop fighting. The frequency had never been an enemy. It had simply existed, and he had made himself quiet enough to hear it, had made himself sensitive enough to perceive what was always there. The planet breathed, would continue breathing long after he was gone, and fighting that truth had cost him everything. Elias closed his eyes, let the cold seep into his skin, let a wind sound fill the space. Let his heartbeat slowly accelerate back toward its normal rhythm. 60. 2 beats per minute. 68. 74. When the supply plane arrived 3 weeks later, the scheduled resupply drop that came 4 times per year, they found the house sealed but empty. The generator was off. The interior temperature matched the exterior, minus 48 degrees. The decibel meters were frozen, their displays dark. On the floor in the center of the room, they found footprints in the frost, leading to the viewing port, leading out. They searched for 3 days, found no body, no tracks extending more than 10 meters from the house. No sign of where Elias had gone. The Tundra kept its secrets. And at night, when the wind died and the world fell silent, the house stood alone in the snow. Inside, the seismic microphone still recorded, still transmitted data to equipment that no one would ever check, still measured the frequency. 4 hertz, 7 hertz, 11 hertz, 18 hertz. The earth breathing, thrum, thrum. 58 beats per minute, forever.